You woke up this morning and reached for your phone before you even opened your eyes fully. You did not decide to do that. You did not sit up, think about what you wanted, weigh your options, and then choose to unlock the screen. It just happened. The hand moved before the mind caught up, and then, before you knew it, 5 minutes became 20, 20 became 40, and somewhere in the middle of all that scrolling, a thought passed through you, quiet, almost invisible, that said, "This is not how I wanted to start my day." But then it was gone, and you kept scrolling. This is not about your phone. I want you to understand that right now. What just happened in that moment, that gap between who you intended to be when you went to sleep last night and who you actually were when you woke up this morning, that gap is what we need to talk about. Because that gap is not small. That gap is not a bad habit. That gap is the distance between the life you are living and the life you actually have inside you. And most people never close it. Not because they are weak, not because they lack knowledge, not because they do not care, but because they do not realize, they genuinely do not realize how much of what they call their life is not actually chosen at all. Think about yesterday. Not the big moments, the small ones. Think about how you sat down to do something important and within minutes found yourself somewhere else entirely. Another tab, another thought, another distraction, without ever making a decision to move. Think about how you said something to someone you care about, something sharp or dismissive or cold, and the words were already out before you even registered that you were speaking. Think about how you ate something, not because you were hungry, not because you chose it, but because it was there and your hand just moved. Think about how you lay in bed at night running through the same thoughts you ran through the night before, same fears, same regrets, same unresolved conversations playing out in your head. And here is what I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with this question, not answer it quickly, but actually feel it. At what point during yesterday did you feel fully, consciously, deliberately awake? Not just physically awake, not just going through the motions awake, but actually present, actually choosing, actually the one in the driver's seat of your own life. If you are honest with yourself, the answer might be not much. And that is not a criticism. That is an observation. And it is one of the most important things a human being can come to understand about themselves. Because here is what is actually happening. Inside you, right now, there is not one system running. There are multiple, and most of them do not need your conscious participation at all. They have been running for so long, in such a consistent pattern, that they have become completely automatic. They have become the background program of your existence. And you, the part of you that thinks, that reflects, that sometimes lies awake wondering why your life feels the way it does, you are not in charge of them. You are responding to them. This is what the scholars of the heart understood centuries before modern psychology had a language for it. This is what lies at the center of Islamic understanding of the human being, that the self is not simple. The self is not one thing. The Nafs, the internal self, is layered. It has drives, it has moods, it has patterns, it has rehearsed for years, and it operates largely beneath your awareness. And if you do not understand how it works, you will spend your entire life believing you are making choices when you are actually just executing programs you downloaded years ago and forgot about entirely. Let me show you what I mean. There is something that happens to people around their goals, something specific, something almost mechanical in how predictable it is. A person decides they are going to change something about their life. Maybe it is waking up earlier, maybe it is reading more, eating differently, praying with more presence, speaking more kindly to the people they love. The decision is real, the intention is sincere, they feel it. And for a few days, sometimes for a week, sometimes even longer, they follow through, and it feels good. It feels like they are finally becoming who they want to be. And then something shifts, not dramatically, not in one big moment, just a slight loosening, one skipped day, one small compromise, one rationalization that sounds completely reasonable in the moment, and then another. And then before they can even track how it happened, they are back exactly where they started. Not just similar to where they started. Exactly. Same habits, same timing, same thoughts, same feeling in their chest at night that something needs to change. And the next time they try, the gap between the decision and the collapse is a little shorter. And the time after that, shorter still, until eventually the decision itself starts to feel like a performance, a ritual with a known ending. They go through the motion of deciding because somewhere inside them there is still a voice that knows who they could be. But underneath that voice is something else that has already calculated the outcome. The Nafs has run this program before. It knows how it ends. And this is the first thing you need to understand about the automatic life. That your internal system is not neutral. It is not a blank canvas that simply waits for your instructions. It is an active, powerful, deeply conditioned architecture that has learned from everything you have ever experienced, everything you have ever repeated, and everything you have ever allowed. And it uses that learning constantly, silently, to predict what comes next, and to guide you toward familiar outcomes, not good outcomes, not the outcomes you say you want, familiar ones. Because for the Nafs, familiarity and safety are the same thing, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if the Nafs treats familiarity as safety, then all of your patterns, even the ones that hurt you, even the ones you are ashamed of, even the ones you have promised yourself 100 times you would stop, all of them are being protected, not by weakness, not by laziness, by a system inside you that is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect what it knows. A person who grew up in an environment where they had to be always productive to feel worthy will find that stillness feels dangerous to them. Not inconvenient, dangerous, like something is wrong. So they fill every moment. They call it ambition. They call it discipline, but underneath it is a program running, stay busy or you are worthless. They did not choose that program. It was written into them. A person who learned early that showing emotion led to pain will find that when emotion rises in them, something automatic shuts it down. They will call themselves strong. They will call it emotional maturity, but underneath it is a program running, feel nothing or you will get hurt. They did not choose that either. And the person who says they want deep connection but consistently pushes people away when those people get close, they are not confused. They are not contradictory. They are running a program that learned somewhere, somehow, that closeness is risk. None of these people are choosing these outcomes. They are being chosen by their patterns. And this is the hidden life, the automatic life. The life that runs underneath the life you think you are living. And if you have ever felt like something is steering you that you cannot quite name, if you have ever watched yourself do something and thought, why did I just do that? I did not want to do that. Then you have caught a glimpse of it. You have seen the machinery. Now let us go deeper. Because the Nafs is not just one pattern. It is not just one program. The scholars who studied this most carefully described the Nafs as having states. And the most important thing to understand about these states is that they do not stay fixed. They shift, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. And your inner world, the quality of your attention, the depth of your awareness, the degree to which you are actually awake to your own life, depends almost entirely on which state the Nafs is in at any given moment. The Nafs Amara, the Nafs that commands. This is the state of the self that is entirely in the grip of its own impulses. There is no reflection here. There is no distance between the urge and the action. Whatever the Nafs wants, it moves toward. And the wanting changes constantly. Comfort, stimulation, validation, avoidance, pleasure, relief. The Nafs Amara does not care about tomorrow. It does not care about who you want to be. It only cares about now, about this moment, about making this specific feeling either more comfortable or less uncomfortable. And in this state, a person is not really making choices at all. They are reacting. Every scroll is a reaction. Every bite of food you did not need was a reaction. Every avoidance of a difficult conversation was a reaction. Every moment you spent performing for others instead of being honest was a reaction. You were not directing your life. The current was carrying you. And because the current was so familiar, because it moved in the same direction it always moves, it did not feel like you were being swept away. It felt like walking. This is the part that is genuinely terrifying when you first understand it. Not because the Nafs is evil, not because it is trying to destroy you, but because it is so quiet, so seamless, so indistinguishable from your own will. You think you chose, but the Nafs chose and then thought through you after the fact. Have you ever done something and then almost immediately constructed a reason for why it made sense? Have you ever noticed that the justification for your behavior always arrives just a little too conveniently, that somehow, whatever you already wanted to do, there is always a perfectly logical explanation for why that was the right thing to do? This is the Nafs narrating after the fact. The decision was already made, automatically, reflexively, in response to a stimulus you may not have even consciously registered. And then the mind, your brilliant, articulate, clever mind, wrote a story around it, not to reveal the truth, to confirm the outcome. And you believed the story because you wrote it. This is why understanding the Nafs is not a religious exercise in the way most people assume. It is not about guilt. It is not about reciting lists of prohibited things. It is about understanding the mechanics of your own inner world with a degree of honesty so deep and so unsentimental that you can actually see what is happening, because you cannot change a pattern you cannot see, and you cannot see a pattern you are convinced is just your personality. Most people have confused their automatic responses with their identity. They have looked at the patterns they repeat most often, the way they handle stress, the way they respond to criticism, the way they seek comfort, the way they avoid fear, and they have called that who I am. But it is not who you are. It is what you have practiced. There is a difference so enormous between those two things that once you see it, everything changes. Because if these patterns are who you are, they are fixed, unchangeable. You are stuck with them. But if they are what you have practiced, what you have been practicing sometimes for decades without realizing it, then they are patterns. And patterns can be interrupted. Patterns can be understood. Patterns can, with real effort and real awareness, begin to change. But first you have to stop calling them you. Now let us talk about the Qalb, because the Nafs is not the whole story. And if you only understand the Nafs, you will think the solution is willpower. You will think the answer is discipline. You will think, I just need to be stronger. I just need to want it more. I just need to try harder. And you will find, as every person who has only used willpower to fight their patterns has found, that it does not work, not for long, not on the things that matter most. Because willpower works at the surface, the patterns live much deeper. The Qalb, the heart, is what the scholars described as the center of the human being, not the physical organ, but the inner faculty that orients the whole person, that tilts the entire self in a direction. The Qalb is where meaning lives. It is where love lives. It is where the things that actually matter to you, not what you say matters, but what quietly, persistently, organizingly matters in the deep background of your days. It is where all of that lives. And the Qalb can be in different conditions. When the Qalb is unified, when it has a clear orientation, when it knows what it loves most and arranges itself around that love, a person moves differently through the world. There is something integrated about them, something coherent. They do not constantly contradict themselves. They do not wake up resolved and go to sleep having betrayed every resolution. Their words and their actions have a relationship with each other, but most people are not in that state. Most people have a divided Qalb, not because they are bad people, not because they are spiritually lost, but because the modern world, the environment most people grew up in and continue to live in, constantly fragments the Qalb's attention. It pulls it in 100 directions simultaneously. It offers 100 different things to love, 100 different identities to perform, 100 different versions of a good life to chase after. And the Qalb, which is oriented by what it loves, becomes disoriented. It loves too many things that cannot coexist. It wants stillness and stimulation, depth and distraction, presence and escape, recognition and privacy, growth and comfort. These things are not enemies, but they cannot all be loved equally, at the same time, at the same intensity, without the inner world becoming chaotic. And a chaotic Qalb produces a chaotic life. Not necessarily chaotic on the outside. You can look fine from the outside. You can have your schedule and your responsibilities and your relationships and your routines, and still, underneath all of it, there can be this low hum of internal disorder. This sense that you are never quite fully where you are, that a part of you is always somewhere else, that you finish one thing and there is no satisfaction, just the immediate pull toward the next thing, as if resting is a problem that needs to be solved. That hum, that restlessness, that is the divided Qalb. And here is the deepest thing about the automatic life, the thing that almost nobody talks about. The automatic life is not just automatic in what you do, it is automatic in what you feel. Because when the Qalb is divided, when it has no clear center, when it has been left to be shaped by the noise around it rather than the stillness within it, then even your emotional responses become programmed. You do not feel what the situation calls for. You feel what the pattern produces. Someone criticizes something you made, something you worked hard on, something you care about. And before you have even processed what they said, before you have genuinely heard it, evaluated it, considered whether it is true, something has already activated, something old, something learned. Maybe it is defensiveness, maybe it is collapse, maybe it is the urge to explain yourself, to over-explain, to unravel in apology, to shrink. Maybe it is cold withdrawal. Maybe it is the need to immediately attack back. Whatever it is, that was not you responding to this moment. That was a program responding to a familiar trigger. And the person in front of you, the real specific, irreducible person who said something to you in this real specific moment, you never actually met them. You met the ghost of everyone who ever hurt you in the same way, and you responded to them. This is what it means to live automatically, not just in your habits, in your relationships. Think about the conversations you have that go the same way every time, with specific people, in specific situations, where you both know, somewhere beneath the words, exactly how this ends, where you find yourself performing a version of yourself that is not quite real, not quite chosen, just the self that got assigned to this dynamic, the version that appeases or escalates or withdraws or explains or stays silent long past the point of silence being honest. You did not choose that version. The pattern chose it. And inside you, there is a part that watches this happen, a part that is not swept along by the current, a part that is quiet and continuous and something like the actual you, the one underneath all the noise, underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the automatic responding. This is what the scholars pointed to when they spoke of the Ruh, the spirit. And I want to be careful here, because the Ruh is not something you can grab with analysis. It is not something you can intellectualize into existence, but you have felt it. Everyone has felt it. It is the part of you that in certain moments of genuine stillness knows what is true, not the truth that justifies what you already wanted, the truth that sometimes contradicts everything you were about to do. That voice, That quiet, persistent, unthreatened voice. The Ruh does not panic. The Ruh does not react. The Ruh does not need external validation or internal noise to know what it is. It simply is, continuous, steady, present. But here is what happens to most people. The noise of the automatic life is so loud. The pull of the Nafs, the fragmentation of the Qalb, the constant stimulation, the constant performing, the constant reacting, the noise is so persistent that people lose the ability to hear the Ruh, not because it stops speaking, it never stops, but because you cannot hear a whisper in the middle of a crowd you have spent years filling your life with. And so you make decisions that feel confident in the moment and hollow 3 days later. You make choices that seem reasonable and then wake you up at 2 in the morning with a question you cannot answer. You spend years building a version of your life that looks, from the outside, like it is working. And then one quiet afternoon something shifts and you feel, in a way that is impossible to argue with, that you are not actually there inside it. That is not a psychological breakdown. That is the Ruh refusing to go along with the performance. Now I want to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Not because it is difficult to understand, but because it is difficult to accept. The reason you keep repeating the same patterns is not primarily about the future. It is about the past. More specifically, it is about what the past taught you to believe about yourself. Not consciously, not in the form of explicit beliefs you can recite, but structurally, operationally, in the way you organize your behavior without realizing you are organizing anything at all. There is something that happens to a child when they are consistently ignored, when their emotional reality is not received by the people around them, when they cry and the cry is not answered, not with anger, not with cruelty, just with absence, with distraction, with people who are physically present but emotionally somewhere else. That child learns something. They learn it without words. They learn it in the body, in the nervous system, in the deep architecture of how they process the world. They learn, my inner life does not matter enough to warrant attention. And then that child grows up, gets older, becomes capable of complex thought and profound insight, maybe becomes very successful by the world's measure. And still, somewhere underneath all of that capability, underneath all of that achievement, there is a part of them that operates from that early conclusion. My inner life does not matter enough to attend to, and so they do not attend to it. They push through, they achieve, they accumulate, they stay busy, they perform helpfulness for others and call it virtue. They dismiss their own needs and call it strength. They collapse at night into exhaustion and call it a hard day's work. And the program runs so smoothly, so automatically, so totally beneath their awareness that it never occurs to them to question it until something breaks, until the body gets sick, until the relationship fractures, until they reach the goal they have been working toward for years and stand in front of it and feel absolutely nothing. And in that nothing, in that sudden, terrifying emptiness where there should be satisfaction, they get a glimpse of something that has been waiting for a very long time. The realization that the life they have been living was organized not around who they are, but around what they learned about who they are. And those are not the same thing. This is the hidden wound of the automatic life, not the surface habits, not the scrolling or the procrastinating or the broken promises to yourself. Those are symptoms. The wound is deeper. The wound is the story you carry about yourself that is so old, so embedded, so confirmed by years of automatic behavior that it no longer feels like a story. It feels like truth. And here is the most important word in everything I have said so far: feels, not is, feels. Because the Nafs does not distinguish between what is real and what is deeply familiar. It treats both the same way, with the same conviction, the same certainty, the same automatic orientation toward protecting whatever version of reality it has been running for longest. The Nafs will defend a false story about you with the same ferocity it would use to defend a true one. Because for the Nafs, the age of the story is the credential. What has been believed longest is believed most. And this is why self-examination is not comfortable. This is why the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he spoke about returning from the minor struggle to the greater struggle, the struggle against the Nafs, he was not being poetic. He was being precise. Because the external battle has a defined enemy, a defined terrain, a defined beginning and ending, but the internal battle has none of those things. The enemy looks like you. The terrain is your own mind, and it does not end. The greater struggle is the daily, moment-to-moment work of seeing clearly what is actually happening inside you and having the courage to acknowledge it, even when what you see is not what you hope to find. Let us talk about what that looks like in practice, not as abstract advice, as a specific, lived thing. There is a moment, and I know you have had it, where you are about to do something and something in you hesitates. Not the hesitation of fear, not the hesitation of doubt, a different kind, almost like a soft no, like a quiet, unhurried signal that says, this is not aligned, this is not coming from the best of what I am. And then something else, louder, faster, more familiar, comes in and either drowns that signal out or reframes it, gives you a reason, shows you why the thing you are about to do actually makes perfect sense, why you deserve it, why this one time is fine, why the hesitation was just anxiety or overthinking or being too hard on yourself. And you proceed, and it feels like reason. But it was not reason. It was the Nafs Amara, narrating over the signal of something quieter and more honest. And the signal does not disappear. It never disappears. But if you consistently choose not to hear it, if you train yourself day after day to respond to its presence with a more convenient story, then your ability to hear it weakens. Not the signal itself, your attunement to it. This is what Al-Ghazali meant when he wrote about the gradual hardening of the heart. Not a sudden catastrophe, a slow accumulation of small choices to be slightly less honest, slightly less present, slightly less willing to sit with what is real. Each one barely noticeable, all of them together, transformative. And here is the thing that makes the automatic life so difficult to escape from. It is comfortable, not pleasant necessarily, not fulfilling, not aligned with who you want to be, but comfortable in a specific, insidious way. Comfortable in the way that any deeply familiar thing is comfortable, the way you know where everything is in a room you have lived in for years, even in the dark. The automatic life is a room you know in the dark. And stepping outside of it, really stepping outside, not just rearranging the furniture, means entering a space where you do not know where anything is. And the Nafs will tell you that this is dangerous. The Nafs will describe the unfamiliar as risk, the unfamiliar version of yourself that does not run the old programs. The Nafs will frame that version as strange, as naive, as unrealistic, as too much work, as something to get to later. The Nafs has always been good at later. Later is where genuine change goes to wait. And the waiting has an architecture, a specific, recognizable structure that plays out the same way in millions of people without them ever comparing notes. Because the Nafs, though deeply personal in its content, is extraordinarily predictable in its strategy. Here is the structure. Something happens that reveals a gap between who you are and who you want to be. A moment of embarrassment, a moment of regret, a conversation that did not go the way it should have, a choice you made that you immediately knew was the wrong one. The gap is suddenly visible, and something rises in response to seeing it. A real urge toward change, genuine, not performed. The part of you that can see the gap is also the part that knows what it wants instead. And for a moment, a beautiful, real moment, those two things are aligned. The seeing and the wanting. This is the moment of possibility, and the Nafs knows it, so it does something very specific. It does not oppose the change directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, it converts the energy of the moment into something that feels like change but accomplishes none of it. It sends you looking for information about the change you want to make. So you read about it, you watch videos about it, you think about how you will explain to others what you are working on, you plan, you organize, you feel in the planning and the organizing a genuine sense of progress, because something is happening, something is moving, something is different from yesterday. But the pattern has not changed. Only the content of the distraction has changed. You were avoiding the difficult thing before. Now you are avoiding it while researching how to not avoid it. And the Nafs has successfully used your best impulse, the impulse toward growth, toward becoming, as another way to stay exactly where you are. This is the brilliance and the cruelty of the automatic life in its most sophisticated form. It does not just neutralize your attempts to change it, it conscripts them. It uses your awareness of the problem as a substitute for actually solving it. It makes the recognition feel like the resolution, so you stay informed and unchanged, aware and stuck, thoughtful, and repeating the same version of yourself across days and months and years. Now I want to say something about time, because this is where the weight of all of this lands most heavily. You are aware of time. You know that time passes. You know that you are older than you were. You know in an abstract way that the days are going somewhere and that the somewhere is limited. But the automatic life insulates you from the felt reality of this, because the automatic life is always dealing with things at the surface level. The tasks, the notifications, the minor urgencies, the habitual pleasures, the habitual avoidances. And when you are dealing with the surface, you are not in contact with the depth. And when you are not in contact with the depth, time does not feel real, not in the way it actually is. Days blur, weeks blur. You look up and a season has passed and you cannot account for where it went. You remember broad outlines, but the texture of lived time, the specific, irreplaceable quality of particular days, it is gone. Not because your memory failed you, but because you were not actually there when it happened. You were there physically, but the part of you that registers experience, the part that is awake, present, actually inhabiting the moment, that part was somewhere else. Running the automatic programs, processing the familiar inputs, generating the familiar outputs. The days happened, but you did not meet them, and there will come a point in every human life. For some people it comes early, for some it comes very late, for some it comes in the last hours, where the automatic life stops being comfortable, where the insulation fails, where the person finds themselves standing in front of the accumulated distance between who they have been and who they could have been, and that distance is suddenly, viscerally, undeniably real. And I do not say this to frighten you. I say it because it has already happened to you in small ways. You have already had that feeling, that sensation, late at night or in a moment of unexpected stillness, that something important is moving through your life unreceived, that there is a version of you, a more awake version, a more alive version that keeps trying to arrive and keeps finding the door closed, not locked, just closed, because closed is easier to miss than locked. You would notice a lock. You would know there was something you were keeping out, but a closed door, you can tell yourself it is just how doors are, that you will open it later, that there is nothing particular on the other side that requires your attention right now. This is the function of the automatic life, not to destroy the best of what you are, just to postpone it, indefinitely, comfortably, one closed door at a time. So what is actually required? Not discipline alone, not willpower alone, not information, not planning, not better systems, not accountability partners, not the correct productivity framework. What is required is something prior to all of those things. What is required is a genuine encounter with what is actually happening inside you. Not the story you tell about what is happening, not the reasonable explanation, not the narrative that positions you as someone who is really trying, who has a lot going on, who understands the problem and is working on it in their own way and in their own time. The actual thing, the actual fear underneath the avoidance, the actual wound underneath the pattern, the actual belief, old, installed, running silently, that is producing the outcomes you keep saying you do not want. This kind of encounter requires stillness, real stillness, not just a quiet room, but a quality of inner attention that most people have never practiced and many are genuinely frightened of. Because in the stillness, the stories stop working. In the stillness, there is no noise to hide in. In the stillness, what is actually present in you becomes unmistakably clear. And sometimes what is present is uncomfortable. Sometimes what is present is grief. A grief you have been busy enough to avoid. A grief for time spent in patterns that cost you things you cannot get back. A grief for relationships that lived entirely at the surface because the depth was too exposing. A grief for the version of yourself that you catch glimpses of and never quite manage to inhabit. This grief is not a problem. This grief is honest. And honesty, real, unflinching, unperforming honesty about your own inner world, is the beginning of everything real that has ever happened to a human being. Every genuine transformation begins there, not in a decision, not in a system, in a moment of seeing clearly, without flinching, what is actually true. The scholars understood this. Muhasaba, the practice of internal accounting, the rigorous daily practice of examining what you did and why, what you felt and what it meant, where you moved toward yourself and where you moved away, was not considered optional. It was considered essential, because without it, the Nafs runs unchecked, the patterns consolidate, the automatic life deepens, and the gap between who you are and who you could be widens year by year until it becomes the defining fact of a life. Most people never do this accounting, not because they are lazy, but because they are afraid of what they will find. And the Nafs knows this, so it fills the space where the accounting should happen with just enough noise to make silence feel impossible. A notification, a thought, a memory, a song, a craving, a worry, anything that keeps you from the one encounter that actually matters, the encounter with yourself. I want to talk about one more layer, because I think we have been talking about the Nafs and the Qalb in a way that might make them sound like problems to be solved, obstacles to overcome, enemies to defeat. They are not. The Nafs, even in its most automatic state, even in its most unexamined, impulse-driven form, is not your enemy. It is a part of you that learned to operate in a specific environment. It learned what was dangerous and what was safe. It learned what you needed to survive in the particular terrain you grew up in. And it has been faithfully, loyally, tirelessly running those programs ever since, even as your terrain changed dramatically. The Nafs that learned to stay silent to keep the peace does not know that you are now an adult who can handle conflict. It only knows that conflict once meant something painful, so silence is the safer choice, every time. The Nafs that learned that expressing need led to rejection does not know that the people in your life now might actually want to hear from you. It only knows the original lesson, so it protects you from asking every time. The Nafs that learned that vulnerability was weakness, that the only way to be respected, to be loved, to be safe was to appear always capable and always in control. That Nafs does not know that the performance is exhausting you. It only knows that the alternative once felt like annihilation, so it keeps performing every time. And here is what genuine inner work looks like, as distinct from the performance of inner work. It looks like approaching that Nafs, that protective, frightened, loyal, mistaken system, not with judgment, but with curiosity, not with the hammer of willpower, but with the lantern of awareness. Not trying to overpower the pattern, but trying to understand it so completely, to see it so clearly, to trace it all the way back to its origin with such patience and precision that the pattern begins to lose its grip. Because patterns lose their grip not when they are fought, but when they are understood. When you can see exactly what the pattern is doing, why it learned to do it, what it is protecting you from that no longer needs protecting, when you can see all of that clearly, the pattern does not need to be forced to stop. It relaxes because it is seen, because the thing it was hiding from has been faced, at least in the light of awareness, and it did not destroy you. This is what the Qalb, when unified, makes possible. When the heart has a center, when it is oriented around something deeper and more stable than the next comfort or the next approval or the next achievement, then the self can withstand the discomfort of seeing itself clearly, because it is not resting its stability on what it finds. It rests on something that precedes the finding. This is not a small thing. This is actually everything, because without a stable center in the Qalb, genuine self-examination becomes destabilizing. You look at yourself clearly and what you find is threatening. So you stop looking. You return to the noise. You return to the movement. You return to the automatic life, because at least the automatic life is familiar. And familiar, as we said, feels like safe. But when the Qalb has a real center, when it is genuinely, not performatively, oriented around the divine, around meaning that is larger than the self, around love that is not contingent on outcome, then looking clearly at yourself becomes not a threat, but a mercy. Because you are not looking at yourself to judge yourself. You are looking at yourself because you care enough about what is real to be willing to see it. And this specific quality of caring more about what is real than about what is comfortable, this is the beginning of the unautomatic life. Not a life without patterns. You will always have patterns. Not a life without the Nafs. The Nafs does not go away, but a life where you are not entirely at the mercy of what you have always done, where the gap between the stimulus and the response has at least a moment, sometimes just a breath, sometimes only a fraction of a second, where you are present, where you are awake, where the automatic response does not simply fire unchecked, because there is something else there, something that can observe it, something that can, on the best days, choose differently. That moment, that small, fragile, extraordinarily difficult moment of actual consciousness in the middle of an otherwise automatic day, that is where your life actually lives. Not in the grand decisions, not in the major turning points, not in the conversations you plan and the goals you set and the resolutions you make at the beginning of every new season. In those small moments, in the breath between the trigger and the response, in the pause before you say the unkind thing, in the stillness before you reach for the distraction, in the space between the feeling and the story you tell about it, in the moment, however brief, where you are not your history, not your pattern, not your conditioning, not your fear, where you are simply awake. And the practice, the real practice, the one that has always mattered, is extending those moments, one at a time, day after day, not waiting for a transformation that arrives fully formed, because it does not. Building it, moment by moment, encounter by encounter, small, honest choice by small, honest choice, until the awake moments outnumber the automatic ones, until the life you are living begins to resemble the life you actually chose, until you can lie down at the end of the day and feel not perfect, not unblemished, not without struggle, but present, actually present in your own life. There is something the scholars said about the heart that has always struck me as the most quietly radical thing a human being can come to understand. They said the heart was given to you as a mirror, but mirrors have a condition. A mirror that is covered in dust does not stop being a mirror. It does not forget its function. It does not lose its potential for clarity. It simply cannot perform it, cannot reflect clearly, cannot show you what is real. until the dust is cleared. The automatic life is the dust, all of it. The habitual reactions, the unexamined beliefs, the noise that fills the space where silence should be, the patterns that run so deep they feel like personality, the stories about yourself that are so old they feel like fact. All of it is dust on the mirror. And the entire work, the whole long, humbling, patient, non-linear, sometimes painful work of understanding yourself is not about becoming a different person. It is about clearing the mirror so that the one you find when you look is not a construction, not a performance, not a product of everything that has been written into you by an environment you did not choose, but something more original than that, something that was there before the programs started running, something quiet, something that has been waiting. You were never the pattern. You were the one watching it.